Hello and welcome to Focus on Israel and the Palestinian Territories. My name is Paul Calvert. Psalm 133 from the New King James Bible says this: Behold how good and pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. I'm with Josh Reinstein and we're talking about his new book, Titus, Trump and the Triumph of Israel, the Power of Faith-Based Diplomacy. Now Josh, tell us, what's your book about?
Well, the book is kind of a culmination of my work from when I started the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus in 2004 and until we created in 2007 the Israel Allies Foundation, which coordinates activities of Christian leaders and Christian parliamentarians around the world. The idea shows you that if you look at Israel through a biblical lens, then what's happening in Israel becomes more clear. Whereas if you only look at Israel through a political lens, it doesn't really make sense. So I start with Titus, who was in charge of the destruction of the Second Temple. He thought when he destroyed the Second Temple that he beat the children of Israel, that was the end of the God of Israel, the end of the people of Israel, the Book of Israel. He even built an arch in Italy to commemorate that victory over the God of Israel. And so practically, if you looked at it, the destruction, the exile of the Jews, that was the end of the Jewish people. But if you knew the Bible and you knew what was happening and the idea of the prophecies from the Bible, then you knew that this was just the beginning of prophecy, that the Jewish people would be kicked out of the land of Israel, and then one day they'd be gathered in the land of Israel and brought back to the land of Israel. So that's just one example, is if you look at Israel from not a biblical lens, you might miss the story. And today, that's exactly what's happening. People are not understanding what's happening in Israel because they only look at it through a political lens and not a biblical one.
So in one way, it's a testimony of God's faithfulness, is it?
Yeah, I think what people understand in Israel is that you can't understand the newspaper if you don't understand the Bible. We're witnessing the fulfillment of biblical prophecy unfold before our very eyes, and people don't understand it. And so if you try to put it in just a political context, it doesn't make sense. So let's give an example. We're the only free democracy in the Middle East. We're the only place that has gender equality between men and women, the only place with freedom of religion, yet places like university campuses that are supposed to be the biggest supporters of human rights and freedoms and liberals are actually having apartheid week and anti-Israel sentiment. So that doesn't make sense from a practical point of view. They should be for the only free democracy in the Middle East. But from a biblical point of view, that makes sense, because if you're rejecting God and the God of Israel, then you have to reject also Israel. So that's just one example, and I try to go through history and up until today when Donald Trump recognizes Jerusalem and show how, if you just look at it from a biblical point of view, a lot of these things make sense and you can see where we're going, not just where we've been.
A lot of the negativity, is it a spiritual battle?
Absolutely. I think what we're seeing is a clash of civilizations against those who believe in Judeo-Christian values and those who are fighting against Judeo-Christian values. I think that people who aren't actively against the God of Israel and the Bible, they don't really have a stake in the game. But if you are against the Bible, if you're against the idea that there is a God, then you're going to be against Israel. And if you're for the Bible and you're for the God of Israel, then you're going to be for Israel. And that's how we're showing, that's how I show through the book how both sides are being stacked up. And we're seeing an incredible coming together of Jews and Christians in the 21st century. But we also see an incredible attack by people who are against these Judeo-Christian values as well.
Now, your title is Titus and Trump. You've already mentioned a bit about Titus. Why Trump?
Well, I think Donald Trump's administration really is the culmination of what we call faith-based diplomacy. The idea of that when Christians get involved with the issue of Israel, incredible things happen. And the best example of faith-based diplomacy that we have is the moving of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Donald Trump just mentioned in a speech that he did it for the Christians. But there is also a myriad of incredible advances that we have in the U.S.-Israel relationship. We have the recognition of sovereignty in the Golan Heights. We have the fact that Donald Trump scrapped the terrible Iran deal, allowing them to get nuclear weapons. We have the defunding of UNRWA, the organization in the UN that just perpetuates the refugee problem. We have the passing of Taylor Force Act, which makes it illegal for American money to go to fund actual terrorists that get paid to kill not only Israeli citizens but U.S. citizens. So we've seen incredible success here in the land of Israel, and that's because Christians are getting involved and saying this is what's important to me, and Donald Trump listens.
A lot of these things sound like they're more common sense than political correctness.
Look, I think that a lot of the Bible is just common sense. People take it for granted that we like freedom and liberty, but those values don't just come from the air. They come from a source, and that source is the Bible. And I think that what everyone was saying is that when Donald Trump was doing these things, that it's going to lead to World War III and the Third Intifada and riots in the streets, but yet we see with this deal with UAE that it's actually brought peace closer together. And people don't understand, how is this possible? How could all these pundits and political professionals misdiagnose the situation so badly? accurately. And so my book, Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel, is kind of giving the diagnosis because I saw these things coming ahead. I knew that we were going to have more peace in the Middle East because of these moves, because they're biblically correct.
What inspired you to write the book, and did it take a long time to write?
It took over a year to write the book and to get it to the point where I was ready to publish. It's a combination of my work over the last 16 years. Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel is not just a book that talks about the biblical aspects. I wanted to have a one-stop shop for anyone who wants to make the case of Israel or wants to learn about the case of Israel. So we go into the legal rights to the land of Israel. We go into the archaeological rights to the land of Israel, the political rights to the land of Israel. But all of them pale in comparison, obviously, to the biblical rights. And I think that with this book, not only do you have a roadmap of how to stand with Israel, but what does the future hold for people who want to stand with Israel? How do they get involved, and how do they make a case for Israel? But also, it's for people who don't really know much about Israel and want to know, why should they stand with Israel?
You've already mentioned about the move of the embassy to Jerusalem. Have you seen other ways of faith-based diplomacy working?
Absolutely. I think you can see it around the world that faith-based diplomacy is actually the most important weapon that Israel has in its diplomatic arsenal. We've wiped out financial BDS, the anti-BDS legislation in 32 states in the United States that make it illegal for companies to be involved in boycott, divestment, and sanction are a result of faith-based diplomacy. We've seen not just the U.S. embassy move, but also the Guatemalan embassy move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And there will be more on the horizon. This is all a big part of faith-based diplomacy. We've seen incredible support in Africa. We have an African bloc of Christian nations for Israel, part of faith-based diplomacy. I go through in the book, Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel, pretty much, the successes of faith-based diplomacy. But I think that what you're going to see is where there's Bible-believing Christians, you can really map out around the world where the next incredible strain of support we're going to get from these countries for Israel. So I try to go back and show the success of faith-based diplomacy, but also predict where we're going to see it in the future. And I think that we're already starting to see the fruits of that labor in places like Latin America and Africa and Asia.
Is faith-based diplomacy a new thing for Israel? And are we seeing bonds of great friendship developing?
Look, there's always been people who reached out to Bible-believing Christians. I think our Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, was a pioneer in this. Rabbi Benny Alon founded the idea of faith-based diplomacy through the Israel Allies Foundation. And, of course, we have people like Menachem Begin who worked with Christians. But the idea of taking one's biblical support and turning into real political action has only taken hold over the last 10 years. And of those last 10 years, we've only seen real success over the last 3.5 years. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Trump administration understands that their base are Bible-believing Christians, and they want to do the things that the base wants them to do. And so they're committed to doing these things for Israel as a way of showing that they're listening to their voters. And I think we're going to see that in Brazil, where you have a Bible-believing president. I think you're going to see that in Australia, where you have a Bible-believing prime minister. And nation after nation, you're going to see this incredible wave of support. So it is new. It's a new, vibrant type of political diplomacy, and it's causing a sea change in international relations for Israel and the rest of the world.
Do you see faith-based diplomacy in the Bible?
That's a very interesting question. I think, of course, you see it in the Bible because you talk about a time in the Bible where they say that one day the nations will come up to Jerusalem and pay homage to the one true God. Well, back then, no one knew who the one true God is. There were hundreds of gods in their eyes, but they talked about a time where everyone would know that there's only one God and that everyone would stream to Jerusalem for the feast. And, of course, we're seeing that prophecy unfold today because of faith-based diplomacy. Christians went out around the world and taught the Bible and to many nations, and the origins of faith-based diplomacy are deep. We have a caucus, for example, in the Filipino Senate. There aren't Jews in the Philippines that were, saying we need to do this. There's 20 million Bible-believing Christians there that said this is important to them. And so I think that faith-based diplomacy has been unraveling through the last 2,000 years. And in the book, Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel, I try to go into the history of that as well. Where is it coming from? And where is this, this remnant in the Christian world who always said that the covenant between God and Abraham is an everlasting covenant? How have they been involved in faith-based diplomacy through the ages?
You've got one chapter about replacement theology. Can we see replacement theology destroyed?
Look, I think what's happening today is that we're seeing a real backlash of these mainline churches who believe in replacement theology that are actually divesting from Israel. They're turning their backs on Israel, even though Israel's the only place that they have clergy visas, they have property rights, they can operate with impunity. Any of these other countries around here, they can't even set foot in with a Bible, yet they're divesting not from Syria, where they'd be executed for being Christian, just for visiting there. They're divesting from Israel, and I think it's because these churches are feeling that their way of life is under attack because a lot of them, all the people who used to go to them, are becoming Bible-believing Christian. I mean, just take Brazil, for example. In 1948, it was 100% Catholic. Today, it's 35% Bible-believing Christian. And you ask them why. Why have a third of the country left mainline Christian thought and come to Bible-believing Christianity or evangelical Christianity? And they'll tell you it's because of Israel, that they believe that they're grafted into the covenant, that they didn't replace Israel, that they're now part of the covenant. And so this change of thought, I think that mainline churches are either going to have to adapt and find a way to explain how God is fulfilling his prophecies in Israel, or I think they will perish.
This must be really exciting for you, being an Orthodox Jew, seeing how much Christians are changing their thoughts and ideas, particularly about Israel.
Well, I think, someone who knows the Bible, this is something that's not unexpected. We knew that during these times that the nations would be carrying our sons in their arms and our daughters on their backs. We knew that 10 Gentiles would lift up one Jew by our garments and carry us to Israel. So we knew that there would be a time of incredible outpouring of support from, the nations. But it's obviously exciting to see God's word being fulfilled and being a part of it and being able to live in Jerusalem and able to see it for yourself. Of course, I can't pretend that this isn't exciting to be a part of the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And as hard as it was for me to write this book, I'm very excited that I have something now that I can give to explain this phenomenon. A lot of Jews are asking me, why are some Christians standing with Israel and some aren't? And a lot of Christians are saying, how do Jews see our support? And what do we need to do? And how do we get involved? So now I have something to point to that they can look at. They can go on Amazon, they can buy Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel, and answer all those questions. So I think I'm excited that I have the book and that I get to see this and live this with my own eyes.
How many years have you been working at Faith-Based Diplomacy? You're the director of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus.
Well, we started the Christian Allies Caucus in 2004 in an attempt to build direct lines of communication and cooperation with Christian leaders around the world. I'm now the president of the Israel Allies Foundation. We coordinate the activities of 43 Israel Allies caucuses and parliaments around the world. That's a network of 1,000 members of parliament who take their biblical support and turn to real political action. So I've been around with faith-based diplomacy since the beginning. A lot of people have started to call me the father of faith-based diplomacy, although there were many giants before me who were involved. So I've pretty much been involved at the beginning, and it's exciting just to see the success of this new relationship that we're seeing all over the world. I think that also the best is yet to come.
We've already mentioned about the United Arab Emirates bringing peace with Israel. Is this part of faith-based diplomacy here in this move for peace?
Yeah, I believe it's a big part of it. There were two big doctrines in the Middle East. There was the Obama doctrine that said that, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is the problem with the Middle East and Iran is the solution. And there was the Trump doctrine that said that Iran's the problem with the Middle East and Israel, a free democracy, is the solution. And for the first time, we got to witness in the last 3.5 years the Benjamin Netanyahu Trump doctrine of peace through strength in action. And because of all these things, these biblically correct things that the Christian base has been pushing and implemented, peace got closer together. We saw our big success with the UAE deal, where it wasn't land for peace. It wasn't we release 1,000 terrorists with blood on their hands so that we give goodwill measures for peace. It was peace for peace, and it's a real peace. It's a peace between the people, and it shows the success of this Trump-Netanyahu doctrine, that it's peace through strength, that we were strong, that they realized that it's important for their people to have peace with us, that economic peace, health peace, regional cooperation peace. And so, yeah, this is another fulfillment of biblical prophecy that when Israel is restored, that the nations will come up to Jerusalem and seek real peace. So we're able to see it, and this is a great example of faith-based diplomacy.
Do you think other countries will follow?
Absolutely. I can make a bold prediction right now on your show and say that in the next 2 to 3 weeks we'll have peace with Sudan. I think that they're very ripe for it, but there are other countries too, Oman, Bahrain, some of the more moderate countries. I think we're going to see them coming into peace. And I think that as long as Israel is strong, there will be peace. And I'll tell you something else. A lot of people say that we did peace in exchange for not declaring sovereignty. I don't believe that. I think that we're going to get both. I think when you're strong in the Middle East, you can get everything. And when you're weak, you get nothing. And I think now we're strong, and we have a president in the United States that is supporting us full-heartedly. And I think people understand that. And that's going to lead to more peace and success in the region.
And this is good for the Palestinians, if only they would realize it as well, isn't it?
Well, I think the common line is that, the Palestinians never miss an opportunity. Look, the problem with the Palestinians is not the Palestinians, it's their leadership. We put a bunch of terrorists in charge of the Palestinian people, and they've led to this terrible dictatorship that is in charge of them now. I think that the Palestinian people are starting to understand that Israel's not their enemy, their leadership is. And I think that once that takes hold, I think there is a real opportunity for peace, not just, signing a document and cocktail parties at the White House type peace, but a real peace between the people, because the people do want peace, and I think there's an opportunity for it here.
Do you have any plans for any more books?
I have to say no. It was a really hard process to put this out on paper. There was a member of Knesset who's a woman named Michal Kotler who said that writing a book is like having a baby, and the fact that, right when it's born you say you're never getting pregnant again, but, after a few years you forget about it and maybe you go at it. So there's always a hope that I might get back into it, but I think for now this is it. I just wanted to put out a book that laid out what is the power of faith-based diplomacy, how does it work, and what is the future. I think I did justice to the cause, and I hope people go to Amazon and buy it. Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel.
Okay, Josh, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me back on the show.
If you'd like to know more about our show, you can join us on Facebook. Just look for Focus on Israel-Radio. Ezekiel 37 verse 4-6 says this, "Again he said to me, prophesy to these bones, and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God of these bones, surely I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. I will put sinners on you, and bring flesh upon you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live. Then you shall know that I am the Lord, and the Jews will receive the real shalom peace."